All right, everyone. So, this week's or this module today is going to kind of extend what we did last week. So last week, and in theory, you guys have finished or are working on the labs. We talked about working with symbols and tweens to help us speed up the animation process. Okay. So you guys, we did some frame by frame animation. We did that with like the bouncing ball and the walk cycle there. And frame by frame animation is great, and there's some pros and cons to it. The pro is obviously that the animation itself is more fluid. The con of it is, or the con of it is it's more time consuming. Okay, think how long it took you to do a walk cycle, which is about 8 frames, versus animating the entire scene that you did, for the homework. It's a lot more work. The benefit of tweens are there that animation process is faster and easier to edit. The con is that the animation is more rigid because you're literally using like a single image and moving it around as opposed to having a character that can change, over and over. Okay. So last week we talked about some techniques to try to make it a little less rigid. We talked about the idea that you could, take a character and break it into multiple symbols as opposed to one symbol. And so therefore, we did a situation where there was like a face and there was a head symbol, an eyes symbol, a mouth symbol, and hair. And you could turn each of them into a motion tween and use things like position changes, scale changes, rotation changes to quickly animate a character, but still be a tween and not have to go through, the time, the more time it would take to do a frame by frame animation. So we did talk about that. Today we're going to talk about some more sort of techniques and little tips and tricks, or I don't say tricks, but ways to assist with speeding up the animation process, taking advantage of motion tweens. Okay. So we talked about the idea of a cycle. Okay. And a cycle is an animation action that repeats. Okay. So we talked about this with walking. So instead of animating constantly redrawing a character walking, you make a character walk one cycle, and then you just repeat it over and over and over and over. Or a character could be, a character could be waving. So instead of constantly waving back and forth like this, you do it once and then you just repeat it again and again and again. And we talked about that. And a cycle typically, even though you're repeating images, is a frame by frame method. But there are ways of using motion tweens and symbols to assist with this. So this is exercise 1. I'm just going to make a new layer here. And I'm just going to draw something like a very basic character. So let's just make like a little, I don't know. There's a little character. And I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to convert it to a symbol. I'll call it purple square. Oops. There we go. You can see it goes into my library here, and I'm going to edit this. I'm just going to edit this. This is going to take it to edit mode. Now we talked about this before with editing symbols. If you edit a symbol, it will edit it back in your main timeline. So if I was to change the color or add something here, like draw some hair, you can see I'm editing the original character here. But one thing we didn't really talk about is the fact that when you edit a symbol, there's actually a timeline in this symbol. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my timeline and I'm just going to literally copy this character. So I'm going to do an insert keyframe that copies the last keyframe, brings it here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to edit this character. So I'm just going to kind of paint over this character in here. I'm just going to redraw it. Eyes are a little bit bigger, but whatever. All right. So here's, frame 1, frame 2. Okay. And I could keep doing this. I could keep adding frames, I could come in here and let's do that again. Copies that, come into here, make a third one. Oops. Okay, so, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. Okay. I'm going to get out of editing mode. And I'm going to go back to my library. And you'll notice now that we have more than one frame, that when you click on your symbol, there's actually this little play button here. And if you play it, what it's actually going to do is run through the entire timeline. So it's actually playing all 3 frames in this case. Now it's going really quickly, but it's doing it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my character here. I'm going to go back to my timeline. And it's already actually, the length of it. Let's pretend it was only 1 frame long. Sometimes it may be that situation. So I'm just going to remove these frames. So you might have something like this. Oops, let me zoom in on the timeline here. What I'm going to do, except, sorry about that, I deleted that one. There we go. What I'm going to do is extend. So right now, this is 1 frame long. I'm going to extend this to use the insert frame. Now, normally when you extend a frame, it just holds the character. But because this has its own timeline, what's actually going to happen is you'll see that see how it repeats all of the frames inside of my symbol. So it's like, it's going 1 frame at a time and it's just repeating happy face, weird face, unhappy face, happy face, weird face, unhappy face. And it just keeps going. So essentially, when your character has a timeline, like my purple square does, whatever, this is, it'll just loop it, over and over and over forever, essentially. Okay, just like what's happening here. And so the longer or shorter this is, it'll just keep looping it. Okay. So that's how to create, this symbol with a timeline. Okay. Why am I showing this to you? Well, let's say I already have this character here. And I'm just going to edit this character real quick so we can go to edit mode. And let's look at the timeline here. Oops. And you can see that in my timeline, I've done out 1 cycle of walking. So, the character walks and then it reverses. So it's a basic, 4-point walk cycle where it goes right and then left. Okay. And now at the moment, my character is essentially walking in place. Okay. So I'm going to go back. Let's get out of this. And I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to add my character to my composition. And I'm just going to resize it using the free transform tool. And then I'm going to extend the length of this, just like with my purple one. I'm just going to make this go about 3 seconds long, or about 90 frames. And when I play this, just like with my, my square, purple square, it's repeating over and over and over. Okay. It's a little bit better drawn. So obviously it looks a little better, but it's the same concept. It's just looping the animation inside of the symbol forever and ever and ever. It's kind of like an animated GIF. Animated GIFs repeat forever and ever and ever. It's like that. Okay. Now, that's cool and everything, but the character's still walking in place. I want to make the character move across the page. So what I'm going to do is apply a motion tween to this. And what I'm going to do is the character is going to start on the left side of the screen. And then at the end of this 3 seconds, I want it to be on the right side of the screen. So here's what's happening. And let me draw it out real quick. Imagine you had a television. Okay. Old school TV. And let's imagine that that TV is on like a little cart, like a little red wagon. All right. And the wagon is moving from the left side to the right side, while at the same time, the TV is just playing the TV show that it's playing. Okay. So this is running its thing while this is moving. Okay. Now, why am I saying, what does that have to do with this? Well, what's happening here is this is like the TV. The character just repeats over and over and over, but we're using the motion tween to literally move the symbol. So what's going to happen is while the character is cycling, we're also moving it from the left side to the right side. All right. So now my character is walking across the screen. Now you could have done this, by doing frame by frame and just copying and pasting frames. That's a way to do it. But there's some benefits to this. First of all, you can always change the speed of this really easily. By making this longer or shorter, that's going to speed up the process because once again, speed equals distance divided by time, as we would say in physics. The distance is literally this. The time is how many frames it takes for it to do it. The less frames it has to do that action, the faster it has to go. If I was to pull this out, it now has more time to do it. So the animation will run a little bit, the speed of the character walking will go a little bit slower. Another thing you could easily do here, I could change the direction a little bit, which is always nice. It's always nice to be able to quickly make edits. I could also play around really easily with the concept of an arc. So remember, we talked about things moving on a motion path, using motion tweens to do things in an arc form. So what I'm going to do is take this and pull out an arc from the keyframes here. Now my character is going to move while also kind of walking in this kind of interesting pattern here. Okay, so these are all things you can kind of take advantage of by utilizing a symbol with its own timeline. I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm kind of zoomed out, but I'll zoom in a little bit easier. So this is the fly layer. I have this fly cycle, and what's going on here? It's a bird, and this is kind of a similar idea. When a bird flaps its wings, it kind of just does the same action over and over and over. So, it starts up, goes down, and then kind of, comes back up again. So here's my animation playing. It's also kind of dipping a little bit because of the wind resistance. So I'm going to take this and just kind of add it to the fly layer here. Okay. And if I was to, Let's zoom out a little bit. I'm going to extend the length. I'm just going to make this back to 3 seconds. If I add a frame, just like with, let's turn this off so we don't get confused. But in the same way, this is just going to loop forever and ever and ever. So what I'm going to do is, rather than having it flap in place, let's do a motion tween. And I'm going to make this bird move from the right side of the screen to the left side. All right, look at that. Look how easy that was. And then if I want to make it a little more realistic, let's make it go on a little bit of an arc. So it's not so perfect. All right, look at that. Okay, so that's combining what we know how to do already. We know how to do a cycle. We did walk cycles. And now we can combine that with motion tweens to make something a little more advanced. Let's do a little practice of making our own walk cycles. So let's go to exercise 2. What we're going to do is we're going to build a symbol of a ball bouncing. Okay. And then what we're going to do is have that ball move from the left side of the screen to the right. So we're going to do this all from scratch. So let's build a new symbol by going to insert symbol. And I'm going to call this ball bounce. Okay. And let's build a ball. So I'm literally just going to build with an oval. Let's make it red or whatever color you want. I really don't care. I'm just going to use red here. All right, there's that. Let's zoom in on the timeline here. I'm going to insert keyframe so it copies what was in the last one and then brings it here. And I'm just going to bring it down like that. I want to turn on onion skin if you want. Let's do that again. Insert keyframe, and I'm going to have it come down again. Actually, I'm going to increase it. So let's move. I'm going to have that there. And let's actually move this one down. Okay. And then it's going to bounce. So it's going to bounce down and then up. I'm not going to include this last one because as part of the cycle, it's like it goes down and then this loops back again. So that it starts there. Okay. So I'm actually going to copy this last frame here. So let's copy this. Or you could just do it yourself. It really doesn't matter. But let's paste that. Okay. Let's see if it did that correctly. 1, 2. There you go. it's going to go really fast. So if you actually go here, you'll see that it goes really fast. So I might actually use like a frame. I'm going to add a frame here. Just to slow it down a little bit so it's not so, really fast. All right, so let's go back and I'm going to take our bouncing ball and it should go kind of like this, so let's kind of extend this out. Okay, so there's the ball. It's bouncing up and down, just kind of like when we did the, character that walked in place or, something like that. And now we're going to make this bounce across the screen. So let's take this. Let's do a motion tween. And I'm going to take it, move it across. So now the ball's going to bounce because it's going up and down. The symbol is, doing this while it's also moving like this. And so, boom, little bouncing ball. Now, granted, it doesn't quite have the, the squash and stretch. Maybe, I could go back. I should probably, you know, if I was doing a little bit better of a, you know, job here, we could go back and do a little squash and stretch here to make it a little more animated. But this is a nice, easy way to do, you know, to have a cycle that also moves.